Hello and welcome to Pause for Payments. I am Kristy Duncan and I'm delighted to have with me two amazing guests from who are fintech leaders in the Asian market. Grace Chong of Counsel at Simmons and Simmons and Sharon Paul, Head of Regional Payments, Southeast Asia at Xfers. Grace and Chong are both based in Singapore. Welcome, Grace and Sharon.
Yep. Hi,
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
This is going to be a fascinating discussion. We're going to discuss the environment in which women work in Asia and how women in Asian fintech can build their careers to become better leaders in the market, especially in this auspicious week of International Women's Day. So let's get started. So in line with International Women's Day this week, let's talk about women's leadership in the fintech space. Grace and Sharon, you both play an important leadership role in the fintech and payments ecosystem in Asia. And maybe can you talk a little bit about as leaders in a male-dominated industry? And Sharon, you just told me that about 20% of the leaders in your organization are women. What would you say are some of the key opportunities and challenges that women face as fintech professionals in Asia? Do you want to get us started, Grace?
Sure. I would say that I was on another panel incidentally yesterday for International Women's Day. And during that panel, I actually, to my surprise, it was quite interesting to learn that 41% of people in the fintech industry in Singapore are actually women. And so actually the percentage has grown quite significantly. And I think in different sectors, women are now taking up a vast majority of different types of roles, and it's no longer just marketing or traditional roles which are seen as covered by women, but actually I see a lot of women in the technical roles, technical development, really leading in management, breaking past the glass ceiling, and it's all really encouraging in that space. And I would say in the legal world, which I'm from, 52% of solicitors are women, and yet I would say that only 19%, according to the latest statistics that I saw, usually make partners. And I would say that in the legal sector, it still poses a challenge for many women in Asia, but there is a lot more recognition of a lot of the unconscious biases in law firms, and a lot of work done to actually increase awareness of issues affecting women, and also to encourage different female entrepreneurs in this space, thought leaders to actually support and promote other women in this space. And I think that's very important for the industry. Yeah. Sharon,
Indeed.
yeah.
Some interesting stats there. Sharon, do you have a perspective from your side sitting at Xfers?
Yeah. I think, when I kind of just do a mental count, I think of my firm personally about 20%. Thankfully, I think, over the years, I've been at Xfers for about close to 2 years now. The good news is that compared to when I first joined in 2019, I can already see the number of women, in the engineering role, in the product role increasing. So that's been very good. And also, I think what has been happening, I think maybe it's the environment that I've also been quite thankful to be in. It's that, there's sometimes a stereotype, perhaps, is there a difference between the West and in Asia, how's it like for women to be in tech or in payments specifically? Being quite fortunate that I think the environment hasn't really kind of struck out, and this, the gender discrepancy hasn't really occurred so much, I've been on most occasions when I'm in discussions, even though it's very apparent that it's still mostly male. But I think discussions still happen quite freely. I can kind of see my male counterparts, feeling comfortable. I don't see them, acting differently, or at least, I don't sense that awkwardness from them. To us, it's just everyone's just on a table, gender aside, it's just discussing. So that's been quite a fortunate experience so far. I think it's so far being, even though, Asia might have sometimes a stereotype of being different from the West, I think.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, yeah, it's interesting how the gender roles play out in the workplace, especially in fintech. So women professionals in Asia operate somewhat differently in a cultural context from perhaps North America or Europe, where women in payments is based. Grace, can you share with us some insights on how Asia's unique and diverse cultures influence the experience of women working in fintech in your market?
Yeah, I would say that that is quite an interesting question to share. I think for a lot of the women that I work with in this sector, they really try to make it work in very admirable ways. You know, I have seen women who literally, you know, wake up at 6 a.m. to, you know, bring the kids to work, to make everything work, go to the gym, and then turn up at work at 8:30, and then work for the rest of the day, and then go home at 7, and you know, pack the kids in and somehow appear on a video conference with me at 9. And this was my boss back in HSBC, and it was remarkable. You know, it was remarkable, all these women really making it work. And I would say that in Asia, a lot of them are extremely brave and endeavoring new fields in the world of payments. For example, it is something which is really taken on a lot of new ways of looking at developing payments, especially in the last 2 years. Things have really exploded. For example, now I see a lot more digital assets companies looking at payments through the lens of digital assets and exploring new ways of actually making payments more interoperable across different jurisdictions, and really thinking of how you can deliver solutions on a digital platform to a wider group of audience in a more customer-friendly manner. So I think women play a very big part of that, in, you know, really fostering collaboration and really you know, encouraging creativity in this space. You know, just now when Sharon mentioned, you know, how things have changed through the years, and I kind of reflected on the first time I actually started in the blockchain space, which was around more than 5 years ago in Hong Kong, in my first blockchain conference, where there were more than 30 men, and I being the only woman then. But since then, you know, things have really moved on in this space quite incredibly. I think it's just a sign of more things to come. And in Asia, definitely the culture and diversity means that there's a lot of different voices and perspectives in play, and definitely a lot of new ways of doing things to welcome in field of payments. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's nice to see the progress. It's fantastic. Sharon, from your perspective as head of regional payments in Southeast Asia, would you care to share your thoughts on cultural differences within Asia itself and how a woman fintech professional might need to adapt your communication style?
Yeah. So for my, perhaps more recently, especially in the first year, I started noticing a trend. So, you know, for good and bad reasons, I mean, COVID happened. But what I've noticed is that it's actually really spurred the level playing field, you know. So yes, it has happened to me personally before. You know, sometimes when I'm in a very huge conference room, my voice naturally, if you meet me in person, right? If it's one-to-one, you know, you can hear me very clearly. Unfortunately, if it's one to many, my voice does physically is unable to travel through. So it's just one of those, right? It's nothing to do with gender, but it's really just physical form of us, right? That sometimes, you know, some women, our voice can't follow through. And, you know, sometimes traditionally it might affect, you know, how much others can hear us, you know, where can we be heard when we speak up. So very interestingly, I know with the whole emergence of like video conferencing and stuff, and I've noticed this even with other counterparts, like in Philippines or definitely in Indonesia, because I personally, among all the region, Indonesia is the market that I talk to the most with other people. So I've noticed that there's really a very nice balance of like people taking turns to talk. You know, other people maybe for some reason or a particular person may have dominated the conversation, but increasingly I've noticed even more. So sometimes, you know, sometimes it's perhaps a male that unknowingly dominated the conversation, but I see themselves catching themselves. They'll be like, oh, before the conversation ends, you know, they will actually they will take turns and kind of initiate, you know, whether whether male or female, like is before the conversation closed, is there anyone else that wants to speak up? So that's a very good chance actually for someone to then suddenly have the chance to speak up. And that has really been a very good culture. I think in the whole 1 year globally, we are all subjected to this new practice, right? And even now, where, you know, at least in Singapore, we're thankful that offices are starting to open up. Unfortunately, our ASEAN counterparts not so much yet. When we go back to the office, that same behavior of wrapping up meetings or making sure that everyone has kind of said their mind, it still carries on. So I think it's a very interesting thing that has happened in the past 1 year that has worked out well for everyone.
Yeah, I
It's
love
very
that.
interesting. Yeah.
The
I should watch out for it.
democratization.
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed, we're all in the same Zoom room with the same sized box, and it really democratizes it so that you don't get the alpha personality taking over the conversation, that everybody has equal space and voice. That's really insightful. Grace, you're currently the only senior female lawyer in an all-male law firm at Simmons Simmons. And Sharon, you've led transaction teams and headed various expansion projects across Asia. How do you think women can lead to inspire in this industry? Do you want to start us off, Sharon?
Yeah, this is something that sometimes I ask myself. Growing up, sometimes I've always, it's quite a norm. I think Grace as well. We catch ourselves in positions whereby we're kind of the minority because of gender, and oftentimes, we get questions like the exact same questions. How do women lead by example? Who are your mentors or things like that? I do realize that I don't intentionally think about this, but over time. I do sense that I gained the trust, right, and the collaboration of other fellow male colleagues to kind of reach where I am today. So I kind of realized that perhaps it just comes down to it sounds cliche, but equality. So if you kind of treat your other counterpart, whether male as well, that you know that you're an equal, right? Just because you're women, I don't expect them to open the door for me, for example. I don't expect them to kind of pass me water first compared to my male counterparts. I personally I'm not particular about such social gentleman behavior. So they kind of observe, they realize that's my style. So they over time start to see me as really just like them. So whether or not, they have sometimes also, culturally they like to discuss for things over late night supper or discussions and stuff. I kind of realized there's never once they will kind of wonder whether, oh, can Sharon as a female come out late at night? Will she be okay? They kind of really just ask and ask whether it's okay. And it's sometimes other male counterparts who are also parents that, of course, they cannot come out sometimes at night. And then, we kind of creates a very healthy dynamics whereby, if you can't make it for such awkward social gatherings, which I think sometimes, traditionally it seems to be awkward for a female to participate in, at least in an environment that I've been in, because I kind of see everyone as an equal and I let them know that I don't want any special gentleman arrangements that they wouldn't do for a fellow male counterpart. I think it creates a social dynamics that it's just everyone's just colleagues, everyone's just friends, it's nothing to do with gender, it's other things in our life, like maybe perhaps parenthood and things like that would maybe sometimes create some awkwardness or like things that they can't participate in. So it's because of other duties, not because of our gender. Yeah. So that's kind of the environment that I've been in, right? And it kind of translates across all things, whether it comes to business, talking to counterparts in from the West, talking to people in, let's say, Philippines, Indonesia. I think even when you discuss to them, mutually people can kind of sense like how comfortable you are talking to them, and then they reciprocate with the level of comfort and confidence back as well.
Yeah, so interesting. So just democratizing the role of both genders, all people. That's a great approach. Grace, did you have any thoughts on leadership as a woman in this industry?
Yeah, I would say that I really echo and hear what Sharon has said there as, really resonating with me quite a bit. So indeed, I think one of the stories which I recalled when she was recalling some of her experiences was how one of my friends mentioned that in her law firm, after the Me Too movement, some of the partners gathered around and wanted to make the law firm a more welcoming place for the senior female lawyers and some of the more junior female lawyers. And somehow how some of the male partners thought that the great idea to do in that instance was to invite all the women in the firm to their Friday poker nights. So that was their way of inculcating women into the culture. So often there are these ways which are well-meaning, which are sometimes quite interesting also in this context. But generally, what I've found personally through the years is that ultimately you have to be your own authentic self, and you do have to learn to trust and learn to really connect and get to know as many people within your organization and just beyond, in fact, your own country location, but all your different officers, people who may be doing the same thing as you do, which is regulatory like me, or people who are in entirely different practice areas. Learn to understand more about what they do, what their lives are like, and what are the latest status of their families, and learn how to connect in that way, not only with the people you work with, but also wider people in the industry, because I think you get a lot more understanding of the community and a lot more confidence that way, and you also allow yourself to really freely experiment and develop and find yourself in your thinking in this space. And I think that is very much also how I grew and developed my career, especially in fintech, because as I mentioned, when I first started, it was something where especially in the blockchain space, it was quite unclear how lawyers would fit or what kind of services we would provide, because at that point in time, I was very much a traditional payments lawyer. We were doing very traditional BIN sponsorship agreements. We were doing very traditional contracts. But once blockchain and a lot of the new age developments landed, we really had to go in deep and understand a lot more tech. And the only way of really doing that was to really reaching out to clients, speaking with them, going out for dinners, really going to tech with tech people, digging into the meat of it and really getting all excited about it, attending conferences. And you are not able to do that if you really just sit within your own corner and assume that the partner will lead you there, or assume that a book will give you all the answers you need. And sometimes even just learning from the job sometimes is not sufficient. I find that you really have to go out there in the community and speak to people and learn from people, and really sometimes even when I'm working for a client, you find that the value you can bring to them is sometimes connecting them with other people in their own organization, which they never knew, or connecting them and showing them different types of services which they could match based on market practices. And that's the additional value you can bring to a client, and how you can find also your identity in whatever you're doing, because I think different women bring different value to everything they do, and they should have the courage to reinvent themselves and really and really be comfortable and trust other people in that process as well. Yeah.
Wow, that's great insights, Grace. I love the way you really reinvented yourself as a blockchain expert and all the different avenues you took to really dig deep into blockchain. I want to switch gears a little bit. And I know that regulation is a big part of what both of you do. Grace, certainly with the head of the regulatory team at Simmons and Simmons, previously with the MIS, and Sharon, you closely were involved, obviously, with Xfers engagement and regulatory approvals. Sharon, can you share a little bit about, in terms of the younger women on your team or other young women coming up the ranks, what career advice would you share with them?
Yeah. Definitely, I think, as someone just in general looking to climb up the corporate ladder, or just in general, whether or not one day start their own firm as well, right? Just so long as you have an interest in a particular industry or market, it's definitely necessary to make sure that you are relevant. And by relevance, I mean, definitely what this means is that you are able to help someone on the other table, whether it's potentially a client or whether it's a friend in the industry. What insights can you also learn about it, such that down the road someday, one day you can help the other party. So it comes down to really, and this definitely applies in the regulatory, where everyone in the whole world, because the payments or fintech is changing so much all the time. There's so many different players that's coming in. Regulations are also trying to catch up, and kudos to the regulators around the the whole market, they are each catching up faster and faster. So hence, it's always never the same. Like what could happen? Well, 2 years ago, there could be a new regulatory change that changed the whole thing, and hence new business models, new product like for this year or next year onwards. So it's definitely very important, I think, for anyone to always stay abreast with like what's happening. And this really just comes down to everything, right? Because regulations is really trying to help protect the consumers, trying to help protect the businesses, while every country is trying to also ensure that their countries are, compared to other countries, competitive enough. So that's kind of the tough role of the regulator. So with this, someone that's trying to work with a regulator or work alongside with them, they need to understand definitely the whole product. What exactly is the tech doing? So a bit of a name plug for Xfers, I guess. We're kind of one of the very early ones to actually launch a blockchain stablecoin for Singapore dollar. So launching something so bold like this, you really need to know everything about it. You need to know the actual tech. You need to know, with the technology, like is it a private blockchain? Is it a public blockchain? How susceptible is someone to perhaps money laundering with what we have to do? So you really need to help the regulators out by ensuring that everything watertight, but yet at the same time, it promotes the use case that we each want. So this applies also even in non-blockchain world, right? In the payments world. There's so many wallets that are coming up in all, especially in ASEAN, I think, where we have kind of leapfrogged not just credit cards, but it's bank transfers to all the different other non-card payment methods. We really need to understand like what's the tech behind it, who are involved in the money flow, from the consumers to the banking partners, and then hence, when you engage with the regulators, they are comforted and they are assured with, hey, I'm talking to someone who really knows their stuff and has really been aware with these are the players that are involved that somehow touches the money. These are also the tech that is relaying the information of all this money transfer instructions. So once you come down with that, and talk to them from a very layman perspective, casual perspective sometimes, it really helps, I think, advance conversations with regulators in the industry. So that's kind of what I found, like really know your technology stack, really know your banking partners, your financial player partners, whenever you're trying to kind of launch something in the market.
Sorry, take myself off mute. Great points, Sharon, especially knowing your stuff is so important, especially in the regulatory environment. So all of these things are coming together. Grace's comments about be your authentic self and lifelong learning so that you can assist clients and different approaches to learning, through conferences, through books, through industry associations, through dinners, so you can pick people's brains and ask questions in a more informal setting. I think all of these really play into this idea of lifelong learning, and always, especially in our industry, especially fintech, things are moving and changing so rapidly. And what is true today won't necessarily be true 3 or 5 years from now. So you have to stay on top of things. These are really fantastic insights. We're going to close off the discussion now. Do either of you have, I'll ask both of you for final last advice that you would give to your 30-year-old self, just starting out in this industry. Sharon, any words of wisdom?
Yeah, definitely I'll say don't be lazy. So always continue to stay driven, curious, whether it's reading up, watching videos, or going for dinners, talking to people, like never ever stop that. Like whether it's their 20-year-old self, 30-year-old self, hopefully 70-year-old self, like that has to always continue. So yeah. That's it.
Awesome, thank you. Stay active. Grace, what would your advice to your younger self be?
I would definitely say to always be braver, because I think people are definitely often more sensitive to negative than positive stimuli, and we are always perennially, haunted by our fears, and definitely to have more courage and to forge forward and always believe that you could make your mark and you could leave something important back as your legacy one day. Yeah.
I love that. Leave a legacy and stay active. And Grace mentioned earlier, build and maintain that network, which is something that I've always spoken about is your network being one of your single most important career assets. This has been a fantastic discussion, especially in light of International Women's Day and International Women's Week. Thank you, both of you, for sharing your insights. Congratulations, Sharon, on your recent round of funding at Xfers. And Grace, thank you for inviting Sharon and for both of your participation. I'm going to invite everybody to join us for other Pause for Payments episodes that we run weekly, interviewing and having great discussions with amazing women from around the world of payments. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Kristy.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.